This is your world news broadcast coming to you live from the capital, Algiers, and up next are tonight's top stories. The terrorist organization MAC fails again to carry out plots against Algeria. Members admit Moroccan backing and irregular Moroccan migrants say they fled regime repression. Also in our news, European Institute warns of an imminent social unrest in Morocco. Rabat expels Spanish journalists and blocks migration coverage, while rights groups accuse it of ceding sovereignty to the Zionist entity. Next up, Palestinians killed and wounded in Zionist strikes on Gaza displacement tents. 8 blocked from besieged Kasra for an 8th day, and the UN warns of rising settler violence in the occupied West Bank. And drone attacks hit Moscow and Kiev. Russia reports strikes on Black Sea cargo and fuel vessels, and a drone downed over Romania. NATO points to Russia. These stories and more shortly. Welcome back to the details. First off, in our news, an Algerian TV documentary has revealed details of a plot by a 6-member criminal group linked to the MAC terrorist organization to disrupt Algeria's July 2nd legislative elections. The group included 4 Moroccan nationals residing illegally in Tizi Ouzou. According to the documentary, members said they received instructions from MAC leaders based in France, including Farhat Manni, to discourage voter participation through calls to boycott the elections on social media.
We received instructions from members of the MAC movement led by Farhat Mahani to disrupt and prevent elections in general in the Kabylia region. The idea was that Kabylia had nothing to do with the elections and that they did not concern us at all.
I used to listen to the speeches and watch the videos posted by Farhat Mahani and others. They influenced me and I started promoting their project on Facebook.
I entered Algeria illegally. When I came back from work and rested in the afternoon, I would listen to him doing live broadcasts. He would talk to members of the MAC in France and discuss everything related to the elections. He would say, "We have to boycott the elections. These elections do not represent us." He was in contact with them in France. He had strong connections with them there.
When I came to Tizi Ouzou, I was with Mohamed Al-Har and Mohamed Moussaid. We would also spend time with Hamama Hakim and Khalid Zairi. We would be in his room talking to people in France, people who were trying to influence Algeria's elections.
When I arrived in Tizi Ouzou, someone was looking for someone to work with him through a Facebook page. I contacted him and he gave me his phone number. I called him, we spoke, and then I came to Tizi Ouzou province. He would do live broadcasts with people in France, calling for a boycott of the elections and advocating the separation of Kabylia. We used to discuss these issues.
The documentary also revealed that Morocco's authorities provided financial and logistical support to criminal cells linked to the MAC organization. According to testimonies featured in the film, the network helped MAC members from Algeria cross into Europe illegally through the Spanish-controlled city of Melilla. The documentary said the activities were part of efforts to undermine Algeria's national unity.
The members of the MAC movement in Algeria were supported by MAC activists abroad through fundraising campaigns as well as assistance with irregular migration routes between Algeria and Morocco and in the opposite direction. Among the MAC members living in Morocco was Fatah, whom I contacted on a daily basis. He told me that they were living there and had a safe place to stay, allowing them to carry on their MAC activities from Morocco and openly target the Algerian authorities.
The MAC groups in France and Canada would organize fundraising campaigns to help us leave Algeria illegally. After reaching Morocco, we stayed for around 2 months in a place called Nador. We were trying to reach an island belonging to France. When we arrived in Morocco, we had a 3-member cell consisting of myself, Jamal Al-Zaim, and Zarwaq Al-Hadi. Axel Abbasi would also frequently travel to Morocco. We continued our activities by publishing posts on Facebook. We were not prosecuted or stopped by the Moroccan authorities for these activities. On the contrary, the Makhzen supported us in carrying them out.
Continuing the same report, Moroccan nationals linked to the MAC terrorist organization said in documentary testimonies that they entered Algeria illegally after fleeing repression and worsening social and economic conditions in Morocco. They said increasing restrictions and freedoms pushed them to leave the country and seek safety elsewhere.
What pushed me to come to Algeria was the lack of jobs in Morocco. There are also abuses and injustices against citizens. There is hardly any middle class in Morocco. There are the wealthy and those living in very difficult conditions. That is what pushed us to flee to Algeria. In Morocco, there is a small group of people who live relatively well, while others live in extreme poverty. The middle class is very small. Poverty is what brought me here. Algeria became a refuge for us and helped us greatly. It helped me and my parents. I will never forget what it did for us. I entered Algeria illegally. I was arrested in Nama and sentenced to 2 months in prison. I spent 1 month and 20 days in detention before being released. I was then sent back to Morocco, but I returned to Algeria illegally. The Moroccan state subjects its people to a great deal of injustice. It does not care about its population. If you have money, you can eat. If you don't, you go hungry. You need to work, but there are no jobs. Even when you find work for a week, you can then spend 2 months without working. You cannot live like that. You have to leave the country to make a living.
Away from the security file, Algeria is calling for faster implementation of joint energy projects with Niger and Côte d'Ivoire to strengthen shared interests and expand cooperation. Energy and Renewable Energy Minister Mourad Adjaz stressed the need for closer coordination and regular follow-up on partnership projects with both countries. Turning back to Morocco, a Spanish think tank has warned of imminent social unrest in Morocco, citing economic stagnation and growing youth unemployment. It said mass attempts to reach Ceuta reflect the deepening crisis, warning Morocco could be nearing a point of no return. The details with Karim Sfawi this time.
A social explosion may be looming in Morocco, according to Spain's Elcano Royal Institute, which has been closely analyzing the country's economy, as well as the growing gap between economic growth and people's everyday reality. On paper, Morocco's economy is expanding, but for many ordinary Moroccans, that growth is not being felt where it matters most, in jobs, wages, and living standards.
The youth unemployment rate reached 37%, and last year 230,000 of the 400,000 Moroccans who reached the age to start working were neither at work, in education, or in training. This situation is linked to the weakness of the private sector and the entrenchments of crony capitalism, in addition to the dominance of the state and large groups over broad sectors of the economy, as well as social inequalities and the deterioration of public health services.
In its in-depth analysis of the crisis, the Institute also links the arrival of thousands of young Moroccans at the Spanish enclave of Ceuta to the country's dire economic situation. For Elcano Royal Institute, this was more than just another episode of irregular migration. It was a warning sign and a symptom of a much deeper social and economic frustration.
The estimated 70,000 Moroccans who crossed over the Spanish North African enclave of Ceuta on July 30 and 31st were not fleeing a war or some natural catastrophe. They were making a national decision to flee a country that offers them no hope of finding a job, let alone training. The continuation of this current development model could lead to a social explosion within Morocco.
An economy burdened by unemployment, inequality, and cronyism. This is how Elcano Royal Institute summarizes the reality of Morocco. And with millions of young people left on the margins, the warning is clear. Frustration is deepening, tensions are rising, and the risk of social unrest is becoming harder to ignore.
Against this backdrop, tensions are also emerging over press freedom. Spain's public broadcaster has condemned Morocco's expulsion of Spanish journalists from FNIDC while covering migration attempts towards Ceuta and conditions near the border. It called the move a serious obstacle to press freedom and access to information, saying it restricts journalists' ability to independently report the events.
The Spanish Radio and Television Corporation expresses its strongest condemnation of the decision by Moroccan authorities to force the RTVE and FA News teams deployed in the area of Castillejos Fnidq to leave the town. Our professionals were in the municipality providing rigorous journalistic coverage of undeniable public interest, reporting on the movement and social situation in the area surrounding the border with Ceuta. The expulsion of our professionals from Castillejos represents a serious obstacle to press freedom and the right to information.
And the controversy extends beyond the media, with public criticism also targeting Morocco's ties with the Zionist entity. Protests and public criticism are continuing in Morocco following the opening of the new Zionist liaison office in Rabat. Rights groups and activists say the move shows continued cooperation with the entity despite public opposition and are calling for an end to the normalization.
The presence of a liaison office and embassy or the raising of the Zionist flag on Moroccan soil is completely contrary to the will of the Moroccan people and is a disgrace for all those who have normalized relations with the Zionists or aligned themselves with normalization processes under any pretext. This shameful resistance further undermines our country's sovereignty and decision-making and subjects its policies to the policies of global colonial powers and the project of the Zionist entity in the region.
The focus now shifts to the occupied Western Sahara. Rights groups are also raising concerns. The Sahrawi Association for Human Rights, Qadessa, has condemned Moroccan abuses against the Sahrawi people and called for international action. The group also denounced restrictions on journalists and international observers in the occupied territories, as well as the detention and torture of activists. From Western Sahara to Gaza, the humanitarian situation remains equally alarming. A Palestinian child has been killed by Zionist occupation fire near displaced people's tents in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Red Crescent said the child died from injuries sustained a day earlier. 3 others were also wounded by occupation gunfire targeting tents in Al-Mawasi area. Separately, occupation forces detained 3 humanitarian aid truck drivers near the Karam Abu Salim crossing in what officials described as another violation of the ceasefire. Yet, amid the devastation, some Palestinians are still finding ways to hold on to everyday life. In the middle of the war-torn Gaza Strip, a new seaside cafe is offering residents a rare place to escape, reconnect, and enjoy a moment of normality amid the devastation. Here's Zara Virginia with more.
Surrounded by bombed-out buildings and a makeshift tent camp, a new cafe has opened in Gaza just a few days ago. Ashati, meaning the beach, is quickly becoming one of the enclave's new spots to escape and breathe. Like an oasis in the middle of the desert, Hind Khudari's cafe is bringing a little life back to a territory devastated by nearly 3 years of Zionist genocide.
I started a little over a week ago. I decided to open this cafe simply because I missed Gaza. The Gaza I love, the Gaza we have been deprived of for all these years of genocide.
Opening a seaside cafe in an enclave that has been almost completely destroyed and remains under siege takes real courage. The challenges Hind faced could have put anyone off, but the young Palestinian journalist was determined to make it work.
Everything has been a real challenge, even getting electricity and water to the cafe. It's a daily struggle, costly and difficult, but at the same time we are doing everything we can to provide even this small service to the people.
A journalist by profession, Hind sees the cafe as something of a personal achievement, a way of reclaiming a part of her life after watching so many of her colleagues die in Zionist bombardments. For her and for all Gazans, Ashati is a place to escape, breathe, and perhaps take the first step toward a new beginning.
Maybe people love me, or maybe those around me wanted to support me in a different way because they saw how exhausted I was throughout the genocide. They understood that I deserved a break, a little distant from journalism. Even though I'm still connected to it, I really needed that little break.
Families sitting together by the sea, taking a breath and simply enjoying a moment of peace. It is yet another reminder of the resilience of the Palestinian people, a people who continue to hold on to life, remain standing and find ways to keep going despite everything.
But beyond these rare moments of normality, the humanitarian crisis continues to deepen. Occupation forces have kept the town of Qasra near Nablus in the occupied West Bank under siege for an 8th consecutive day. UNICEF says it has been prevented from delivering humanitarian aid to the town, where residents have also faced repeated settler attacks and blocked roads, restricting access to medical teams and assistance. And the pressure on the Palestinians extends beyond Qasra. Occupation forces have detained dozens of Palestinians during fresh raids across the occupied West Bank. Palestinian officials said around 20 members of one family were detained and beaten in Al Khalil, while 12 others were arrested in several cities. The UN warns of rising violence, killings and displacement, reporting nearly 3,000 settler attacks against Palestinians since 2025. Elsewhere in the Middle East, Lebanon's health ministry says 4,346 people have been killed and 12,301 wounded since the Zionist occupation attacks began in March. The latest figures include 11 Lebanese killed in renewed strikes on Saturday, pushing the overall toll to more than 16,600 casualties. And tensions are also spilling over into neighboring Syria. Occupation forces entered the town of Al-Rafid in Syria's Knitras countryside overnight. Syrian state media said the troops carried out raids and searches of several homes in the area. Further south, the conflict continues to escalate in Yemen. Houthi forces launched fresh missile and drone attacks on Yemen's Muka and its port, according to government-aligned forces. 6 ballistic missiles and 4 drones reportedly hit the area, wounding civilians and damaging homes and property. The port remains out of service after previous attacks. Meanwhile, the Yemeni army said it carried out 181 operations against Houthi targets over the past 24 hours, reportedly killing or wounding dozens of fighters and destroying military equipment and weapons depots. Meanwhile, tensions remain high around another strategic flashpoint in the region, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Armed Forces Chief Major General Hatimi has sharply criticized President Donald Trump over his remarks on the Strait of Hormuz. Hatimi said Iran would not allow U.S. forces or bases to return to their previous position in the region, stressing that Washington has no permission to enter the Gulf of Oman, or the Strait of Hormuz. He also described Hormuz as a vital strategic asset activated by Iran's top military leadership. Alongside the military rhetoric, diplomatic efforts are also underway. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said talks with Oman are now entering their final stages. Speaking after a government session, Araghchi said negotiations with Muscat are close to completion. Tehran has previously said the talks focus on securing maritime routes for ships passing through the strategic waterway. But the tensions are also raising serious environmental concerns. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai has warned that the environmental damage from oil pollution in the Strait of Hormuz could cost trillions of dollars. He called on commercial shipping operators to take legal and ethical responsibility for addressing the damage, while urging all parties to follow environmental and maritime safety standards. Turning now to Europe, where another crisis is putting pressure on governments and communities. British Prime Minister Andy Burnham has announced a £65 million emergency package to support farmers and tackle the impact of drought. The plan includes environmental investments and new water storage facilities. Burnham acknowledged the funding may not cover all the challenges facing farmers, but said the money is available for rapid development or deployment. And extreme weather is also fueling a wave of wildfires across the continent. The fires are intensifying, destroying vast areas, damaging homes, and forcing thousands to flee. Spain, Croatia, and the UK are among the hottest hit as extreme heat, dry conditions, and strong winds fuel the flames. And now let's follow this report by Salman Assab.
Wildfires are sweeping across Europe, with Spain among the hardest hit. In civil province, more than 35,000 hectares have burned, while hundreds of firefighters and aircraft battle the flames. Strong winds could worsen the situation and threaten nearby communities.
More than
30,000 or 35,000 hectares have already been burned, plus what seems to be expected throughout the day because the winds are going to pick up speed. We expect to be informed this afternoon by the monitoring committee, of which I'm also a member as a mayor of the affected area, that the wind speed will increase this afternoon along with the fire's danger level, so that it continues to gather fuel towards Athnal Koyar and towards the north.
The situation is also critical in Croatia, where a wildfire tore through the coastal town of Omiš. One person was killed and dozens injured, while around 1,000 people were evacuated to emergency shelters. The blaze burned 100 hectares in just 4 hours, destroying homes and vehicles. So as firestorm, ash, smoke, embers flying and burning everything in their path. Unfortunately, a large number of houses were damaged. A large number of vehicles burned on the road, beside houses. Those that were in the way and had not been moved, unfortunately burned out. Meanwhile, wildfires in England and Wales have reached record levels as extreme heat and dry conditions fuel new outbreaks. Fire chiefs, this year's fires have already surpassed last year's record, with homes destroyed and hundreds evacuated.
You know, we've well surpassed the figures from the previous high of 2025, and you'll recognise as well we're only in middle of August, and the wildfire season seems to extend way into November at this moment in time. So we're anticipating this being not just a record-breaking year, but a considerable increase on the number of wildfires previously experienced.
From Spain to Croatia and the UK, wildfires have left a trail of destruction, forcing evacuations and threatening communities. As extreme heat and dry conditions persist, firefighters across Europe continue their fight to bring the flames under control.
From extreme weather to the war in Ukraine, violence continues to take its toll on civilians. 3 people were killed and 14 others wounded in Russian attacks across Ukraine, with strikes hit in Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk. Meanwhile, Russian authorities reported 2 deaths in Ukrainian attacks. 1 person was killed by drone debris in Moscow, while another died in a strike on a bus in Belgorod region. Beyond the civilian toll, Russia is also reporting strikes against Ukrainian military and maritime targets. Russia's defense ministry says its forces targeted the port of Odessa, 3 dry cargo ships, 2 fuel tankers, and Ukrainian fuel facilities in the Black Sea. The ministry said 1 cargo ship was carrying Western weapons to Ukraine. It also reported strikes on a facility producing naval drones and Ukrainian patrol boats near the Danube. Romania says the Spanish F-18 fighter jet deployed under a NATO mission shot down a drone that entered Romanian airspace near the borders with Ukraine and Moldova. The Romanian Defense Ministry said the drone was intercepted early Sunday, with debris possibly fallen in an uninhabited area near Galati. It was the 2nd drone shot down over Romania this month and the 4th this year. NATO said the drone was likely Russian as investigations continue. And finally, before we go, here's a quick look at some of other major stories making headlines in our news in brief with Safian Kanjari.
Sudanese Prime Minister Kamal Idris stressed that there are red lines that cannot be crossed, including rejecting any equivalence between the Sudanese army and what he called the rebel Rapid Support Forces, as well as any foreign interference in the country's affairs. Belgium and Greece are battling major wildfires, with evacuations underway as firefighters race to contain the flames. Belgium's largest wildfire spreading toward the German border, prompting evacuation warnings in nearby areas. In Greece, 2 people were killed in fires on the island of Salamina, where hundreds of residents and holidaymakers were urged to evacuate by sea. China recorded $195 billion, surpassing its international trade in the second quarter of 2026. According to China's foreign exchange regulator, the surplus reached $384 billion in the first half of the year, driven by strong gains in goods, which tolerated $280 billion. Algeria's women's national football team won the bronze medal in the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations after beating hosts Morocco on penalties. The result marks a historic achievement for the Greens, who secured 3rd place and qualified for the FIFA Women's World Cup for the first time in Algerian women's football history.
That's all for tonight. Thank you for watching. See you next time.